Welcome to Where Her Heart Speaks, a show designed to challenge and disrupt ineffective thoughts and behaviors to help you not only embody peace, joy, calm, and certainty, but also to help you live the life you've always dreamed of living. Where Her Heart Speaks with Coach Catherine begins now.
Hi there, it's Coach Catherine. Have you been feeling so stressed lately that you find yourself secretly wishing Calgon or vodka or television or whatever your thing is would take you away? According to the American Psychological Association, 7 in 10 adults have experienced additional health impacts due to stress. Another statistic shows that 74% of people have felt so stressed that they were overwhelmed or unable to cope. Listen, one of the most effective ways to combat stress is to regulate the nervous system. And this is why I've created a powerful infographic titled 5 Ways to De-Stress in 3 minutes or less. If you've been feeling stressed and looking for a more healthy and effective way to relax, I want to invite you to go to bit.ly 5 ways to de-stress. That's bit.ly /5 ways, WAYS, 2, de-stress, DESTRESS, bit.ly /5 ways to de-stress to get your free copy of this infographic, 5 ways to de-stress in 3 minutes or less today. Welcome and welcome back. I'm Catherine James, international speaker, best-selling author, trauma-informed transformation coach, and your host of this show, Where Her Heart Speaks. I'm excited this week, one, because my cold is just about gone and my voice is back, my energy is up, and we are coming to the end of this series. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground over the past 2 weeks, and now we're on the final week. And as we near the end of July, or Minority Mental Health Month, we're completing it. We're completing this series that I'll call a mini series, and it was titled All About Trauma. So 2 weeks ago, we talked about understanding trauma. We got clear on what trauma is and what trauma is not. And then last week, we talked about how trauma impacts the autonomic nervous system. And we spent quite a bit of time unpacking the question, what happens when you know better, but you can't do better? And if you've missed any of the past 2 weeks, I want to encourage you to go back and listen. One of the things that I like to say is you can't fix a body problem with a head solution. So it's not just about getting information, but understanding how that information impacts the body. Physiological sensations will trump cognitive intelligence every single time. So that brings us to this week. And this week, I'm going to say up front, may cause you to raise your brow. It may cause you to question what I'm saying. But before I go too far, I want to remind you that if at any point during your listening you find that you are beginning to feel uncomfortable or that you are remembering things that makes you feel uncomfortable, I want to invite you to stop listening. Or you can just pause and take a moment to reorient yourself, bring yourself back to the present. One of the exercises that I have shared in the past is a centering or grounding exercise. And you simply want to, if you're seated, place your feet flat on the floor, feel your bottom in the chair, and you'll simply orient yourself in the space that you're in. Then you want to identify 3 things that you see, identify 3 things that you hear, identify 3 things that you feel. And this feeling can be an internal sensation or it can be an external object around you or external sensation. So take time to take care of yourself. One thing that is most important to me is that you remain safe, and nothing I say is more important than you being safe. So again, this week, some of the things I say may cause you to raise your brow or question what I'm saying, but what I am actually hoping is that it will stop you in your tracks. I'm actually hoping is that it will stop you or disrupt your thoughts and make you question what you've always believed. Like, this show is all about disrupting patterns and beliefs that no longer serve us. So I'm hoping that you will pause and question some things that you've held on to in the past. So we're covering a topic that comes highly requested, and I'm excited about that. I have titled this one Symptoms of Trauma. Symptoms of Trauma. Now, trauma symptoms can fall into 4 categories: cognitive, emotional, physical, and behavioral. Cognitive symptoms include things like lack of concentration or rigidity in our thinking. Emotional symptoms are things like guilt, numbing, sadness, or fear. And then we have physical symptoms, and I'm going to share a more expansive list here because many people don't equate these things to trauma. And I myself was actually quite surprised when I learned that things like high blood pressure is a trauma response. And I began to wonder, why is that? So I'm just guessing that you may be wondering the same. And there are several reasons. One of the reasons is because hyperarousal, which is a response to trauma, always being on, and inability to relax due to ongoing feelings of threat is stressful. It keeps your body in a state of stress, and stress causes or can lead to high blood pressure. Another reason is, according to a 2015 article in the National Library of Medicine, and I quote, childhood trauma is associated with elevations in pro-inflammatory cytokines, which over time could produce vascular inflammation and elevations in the blood pressure. And then I found another article in Scientific American that said it was noted that researchers asserted that participants who experienced at least 4 traumatic events during childhood, if we think about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, we know that the number 4 meant that people who had 4 or more adverse childhood experiences were more likely to develop various issues, health issues, high blood pressure, diabetes later in life as adults, as well as trauma responses. And so I find it interesting that the number here is 4 as well. But participants in this study, those who experienced at least 4 traumatic events during childhood, on average, by the age 38, showed higher systolic and diastolic blood pressure levels of 9.3 and 7.6, respectively, in comparison to individuals who had not experienced traumas in their childhood. So listen. High blood pressure is not caused by being obese or diet alone. Like, we've been told that high blood pressure comes from being overweight. We've been told that high blood pressure comes from the type of foods we eat. And these studies are telling us that that is not solely where high blood pressure comes from. High blood pressure can also be a symptom of trauma. So, other physical symptoms, I just felt like I needed to get into that one in particular for some reason. Hopefully, you got something from it. But other physical symptoms include aches and pains. And I'm thinking that person that's been labeled a hypochondriac. Always, something's always wrong, something's always hurting, and they go to the doctor and the doctor can find nothing. It could be related to trauma, or it could be a trauma response. Muscle tension, increased heart rate, headaches, sweating, digestive issues, obesity, sleep issues, brain fog, cancer, Alzheimer's, ALS, bipolar, depression, and anxiety. And I'm going to say to name a few because neuroscience is showing us more and more that many of the diseases that attacks our autoimmune system are actually caused by trauma. So I want to say, if you really want to dive into some of the physical symptoms for which the medical field deems the causes unknown, a good book to read, and it's a book, I'm going to tell you that, is Dr. Gabor Mate's latest book called The Myth of Normal. Your mouth will be open the whole while. The whole while. So the fourth area of these trauma symptoms is behavioral. And this is where I want to spend the bulk of our time. Before looking at the behaviors, I want to try to paint a picture to show where the symptoms come from, or the etiology, how they actually go from a event to a symptom. And I'm going to do this using an analogy of the immune system, because we are most familiar with the immune system. So again, the immune system, or not again, but the immune system, as we know, has a purpose to protect our body from things that can bring it harm, things like pathogens or germs. And we know that the immune system can sometimes become compromised. And if we look at the common cold, as we get into this illustration, when someone gets sick with a cold, the immune system is compromised. Like, it's not able to do what it would normally do by way of fighting off or keeping out those pathogens or keeping out those germs. So the effect of the problem is the compromised immune system. And I'm looking at cause and effect right now. The cause can be any number of things. It can be unhealthy eating, prolonged exposure to bad weather, cause things that makes the body get sick with a cold. So when the immune system is compromised, a person can catch a cold, among other things, but we're looking at a cold, trying to keep it simple for the sake of this illustration. So when the immune system is compromised, the cold is the response. And how does one know a person has a cold? We know that individuals have a cold by his or her symptoms. They may have a runny nose. You hear coughing, as you've heard me doing over the past couple of weeks. They may have a fever. Cold symptoms tells us that this person has a cold. So what we see here is that something happened to compromise the immune system, which ultimately resulted in visible symptoms. Now, let's switch to the autonomic nervous system. And what we've learned about trauma, and again, I'm going to say if you've missed the last 2 episodes, be sure to go back and listen. It will make what I say here much clearer, easier to understand, and it will change how you view yourself, how you view others, and how you view the world around you. So if you recall last week, I said the autonomic nervous system is responsible for keeping us safe. It ensures that we fight or flight when needed. It ensures that we rest and digest when needed. And the nervous system fluctuates between stages as necessary. If the nervous system is functioning as designed, it will also ensure we experience moments of calm and joy and peace during those periods of fluctuation. Now, when a person experiences trauma, something happens. Something happens that compromises the autonomic nervous system. Just as when a person doesn't eat well, when a person doesn't give the body the supplements that it needs, something happens that compromises the immune system. Okay? So the event is the cause. The event is the cause. The effect is a compromised nervous system. The event, say someone had a car accident. That's an event. As a result of that car accident, if the body perceives that as threat and determines that it needs to behave in a different manner, trauma was experienced. And then the effect is a compromised nervous system. And I'm saying this simply to simplify this lesson because the nervous system is actually doing what it's supposed to do. Okay, so I'm saying a compromised nervous system, but then the response is either fight or flight or shut down. And then the visible symptoms, and sometimes invisible symptoms to some, appear. So I want you to note that this happens concurrently. Just as with the cold, it's not linear. All of a sudden, it seems like you're sick. Like all of a sudden, you're sick. And then that's how it happens when trauma symptoms come on board. All of a sudden, it feels as though this is how we are, who we were, who we are. Early and during our childhood, when these things are happening, and often even in our adulthood, because it happens automatically, we're not aware that it's happened. So there's no linear scale to follow. There's no, oh, I had an event, so now my body responds, or I have a effect in terms of my nervous system being impacted, and then a response, and then a symptom. Like that does not exist. And this is why explaining this can be sometimes difficult, because we live in our intellectual brain. We've been taught to operate from our intellectual brain. So when we start to talk about things that don't have a sequence, it gets a little more challenging. But I am hoping that you're following along. So I've already talked a bit about cognitive, emotional, and physical symptoms. I now want to talk about behavioral symptoms. And I want to stay here for a while. I chose behavioral symptoms because I feel that most people, and not just what I feel, it's in my experience, it's in my reading, it's in my discussions with peers. Most people believe how they are is just the way they are. And I like to say that God created you and trauma changed you. At least the you on the surface. Like the authentic you is still there, but not necessarily the person that you see, not necessarily the person that others see, and not necessarily the person that you believe you are. So every child wants to be accepted, acknowledged, and loved. When that is not given or received for whatever reason, the child finds a way or tries to get it. Trauma reshapes us. Not feeling loved, not feeling accepted, not feeling acknowledged is hard for children. So we have to change how we see ourselves. We have to change how we see others. And we have to change how we see the world. Not done consciously, but unconsciously. So common behaviors for being liked, acknowledged, or accepted are behaviors such as being overly nice, i.e. people pleasing, keeping quiet, not speaking up for yourself, being a perfectionist, an overachiever, or a workaholic. And let's think about where people pleasing comes from. I think if we think about, again, going back to our childhood, if you're a girl, as a girl, you may have been told things like, girls are supposed to be nice. Or as a male, you may have been told things like, mommy doesn't like it when you're not nice. Or to either child, daddy doesn't like it when you're not nice. So what do you learn? What do you learn when your parents are putting stipulations or someone is putting stipulations on your behavior, saying that in order to be approved, you have to conduct yourself in a certain manner. You learn to be nice at all costs. Like, not being nice means that mommy or daddy won't love you. To a child, that is a grave threat. So you learn to be nice. Now, perfectionism and overachieving was my thing. I learned early, both at home and at school. At home, I learned that if I did things well, if I thought about all of the what ifs, if I addressed them, if I thought about all of the possible questions and made sure that I addressed them, I would potentially avoid ridicule. So I got real good at projecting. I got real good at doing everything that needed to be done so that I could avoid ridicule. And then at school, I learned the only way to be acknowledged was to be first. The only way to be acknowledged was to be the best. And I'm going to just pause and say, if anyone is teacher that's listening, teachers, treat people's children as you would want someone to treat your child. I had some nasty teachers. Now, this was some years ago. And being an African-American child, girl, there was still a lot of prejudice in the school systems. And what I can say today is that I realize, not that it validates it or condones it, but I realized they were operating in their own trauma responses. But I still want to say If you're over anyone's child, treat that child as you would want someone to treat yours. So I was talking about being a perfectionist and an overachiever. And let me tell you all, I hated to lose. And because I didn't know it was a trauma response, I would tell everyone with pride, I'm super competitive. You want to go against me, I need to let you know. I'm going to tell you that up front. I am super competitive. I'm not going to lose. And in fact, I remember about 10 years ago, my manager and I, the company I was working for at the time, my manager and I were looking for creative ways to help the examiners. I was in a claims office, and we wanted to help the examiners remember laws for handling cases as well as procedures for a new program that we had established or taken over. And we thought it would be great to play a game. Now, in the past, I used this format at other companies when I was a manager, and I remember one of the games we played was Family Feud. And what I chose to do was to have the supervisors go against the examiners so that we could see the levels of both. Now, we would hope that the supervisors would have won, but that wasn't always the case. But this time, my manager had also done something similar in her past, and she had used Jeopardy instead of Family Feud. So we created, or she brought in something called, we changed the name, and I'm not going to say it on here, but it sounded like Jeopardy would have been a lot of fun. So we went about creating questions and creating the board for the game. And instead of having the supervisors go against their teams, we had teams, including the supervisors, going against other teams. And I remember there were a total of 4 teams. And I was supervising at the time, and I knew that my team had to win. Everything in me said my team had to win. And I remember having a meeting with my team. I'm looking back at this, you guys, and it's just kind of comical to me. It's comical, but I remember having a meeting with my team, encouraging them to study because we needed to win the game, not study to enhance their knowledge. That was the byproduct of it, right? That's where my mind was. But I was encouraging them to study so that we could win the game. And so at any rate, there were 2 teams left, our team and another team. And most of the easier questions were gone. So I remember near the end of the game, I was the only person on our team answering questions. I was quick draw McGraw. I didn't give them a chance to get it wrong because I was too afraid of losing. It's just, well, when it was all said and done, we won. And let me tell you, I don't remember what the prize was, but I do remember that in that moment, it felt so good to win. And later, I felt so bad because I thought about how foolish I must have looked. Being that desperate to win a game that really had no real, there was nothing of significance in terms of what the prize was. We weren't winning money. We weren't winning days off or anything like that. So I thought about how foolish I must have looked. And I'm just going to say that that's a clue. It was a clue as I look back now that it was a trauma response. And if you've ever looked back and questioned your behavior or felt guilty, you're probably having a trauma response. So other behavioral responses are suppressing emotions, numbing, lack of empathy, bullying. And I'm just going to say, yes, there are adult bullies. Lack of trust. isolation, controlling. I should have cautioned or prompted you all to make sure you had your notepad and pen, because this is a long list, but I'm thinking maybe I'll just create something simple so that you can get access to this list. So many of my high achiever clients come to me unaware that they are suppressing their emotions. They believe that they're simply being strong, when in fact, they're actually numb. And I can relate to this because there was a time for a long time that I too was numb. I remember thinking to myself and wondering why I didn't have any high highs, why I didn't have any low lows. Like my life just felt very static for a long time. So where does numbing come from? Now, if we think about medicine, in medicine, numbing agents are used to control or stop pain. And I just like to think that the body's wisdom knows this, and it causes the same. It causes the body to numb for the same reason. Causes the body to numb to avoid feeling pain, to avoid feeling emotional pain. Now, the unfortunate thing, though, is like I said, you can't simply avoid pain. You also avoid the joy. Like you avoid normal emoting and you miss the highs and lows of life. So while numbing may have been a good thing, it turns out to not be so good when we're missing what's really going on in life. And I would just say, if you're wondering if this is something that maybe you've experienced, just think about the past few years and how much you remember, how many good things you remember, how many bad things you remember. And have a conversation with someone else, because we don't realize we don't remember things until someone else tells us about an event or about a story. So when we think about control, when we talk about control being a symptom of trauma, where this maybe comes from is children who felt like they had no control over the matter when they experienced trauma. So if you experienced trauma and you felt like it was outside of your control, there was nothing that you can do, these individuals tend to be more controlling as adults. Yeah, I'm going to just let you take some of this in. Now, some of the more common symptoms of trauma that we may be familiar with and can identify as symptoms of trauma are angry outbursts, addiction to drugs, alcohol, sex, or pornography. And these are also numbing agents. Hypervigilance, always looking for threat, being argumentative, or having what's called an avoidance personality. Lastly, behaviors such as self-ridicule, self-doubt, victimhood, and pretending or not being yourself are all symptoms of trauma. And I want you to know that for every symptom, there is a cause. But what's fascinating about symptoms is they really kept us safe at one time in our lives. Think about it. As small children who can't physically protect themselves against or from adult bodies, we unconsciously found other means for protection. Like, that is fascinating to me, that there will be so much internal wisdom. And also as adults, Such behaviors as perfectionism, people pleasing, and overachieving may have actually or in fact resulted in your receiving accolades, recognition, or even some level of success. So these symptoms have served us well. And those in particular, it makes it difficult to view those behaviors as trauma responses for that very reason, right? They served us well. But Dr. Gabor Mate says, human functioning is shaped by human experiences. If your functioning is a result of a harmful experience, that functioning is likely continuing to cause harm. Remember physical symptoms. Remember the physical symptoms. Remember the physical symptoms of trauma. What does your medical report tell you? Also, recall safety and connection is brought online through co-regulation, regulating our bodies with other regulated bodies, connecting with others. And this isn't possible if your go-to is to isolate, or if you struggle to show empathy, or if you struggle to trust others. It's impossible to establish or build any kind of relationship without trust. Like, it's impossible. And there's so many people who are saying they want healthy relationships. There's so many people who have issues on their jobs, and we don't understand where it's coming from. I would invite you to consider symptoms of trauma. Consider symptoms of trauma. So we look at behaviors. Is it just the way you are? Is it the way you were created? Or is it the way you were changed? Is it the way you were made? Or is it the way you were shaped? It's time to choose authenticity over attachment. The acceptance, acknowledgement, and love you once craved as a child is now yours to give to yourself. Awareness is the first step toward healing unresolved trauma. And as I bring this to a wrap, my prayer for you this week is that your eyes were opened and you heard with your ears. You heard and saw what is true for you. I pray that you will have the courage to take the steps needed for returning to your authentic self, returning to the you that God created. I pray that you will give yourself permission to experience peace, calm, and certainty, and begin to live the life that you have always dreamed of living. And as I close, I want to remind you that in this life, we get to choose. Choose to listen from that place where your heart speaks, and choose to live a sensational life. Peace and blessings.
Thank you for listening to Where Her Heart Speaks with Coach Catherine, where Catherine aims to challenge and disrupt ineffective thoughts and behaviors to help you not only embody peace, joy, calm, and certainty, but also help you live the life you've always dreamed of living. Follow Catherine on Facebook and Instagram at I Am Catherine James, and visit www.catherinejames.com. Remember, to live the life of your dreams, you must go within and return to the place where your heart speaks.